This episode of the podcast is brought to you by Mapper Forward's first on-demand workshop, How to Become a Coffee Consultant. Available now online for you to learn at your own pace with a certificate available upon completion. Click the link in the show notes to access today for just €50. Welcome to the Daily Coffee Pro by Mapper Forward, friends. I'm your host, Lee Safar, and this is episode 3 of our 5-part series with Todd McCarthy from Full Spectrum Coffee Roasters. And Todd, we are talking about launching your new coffee roasting brand, Full Spectrum. And we've talked about the pros and cons of launching the brand. We've talked about how you make decisions about how you're going to roast your coffee. Today, I want to talk about the education that's required to launch a coffee roasting brand, because while some people will think, you know, I've been roasting coffee for this company that I work for 25 minutes or a couple of years, and then they've decided, that's it, I know how to roast coffee, I'm going to open my own brand. What's the reality of the kind of education that you need to launch a coffee roasting brand?
Well, you just summed up the first 3 years of my coffee roasting career right there. I was living in Sydney. I was roasting coffees that, don't get me wrong, back then I thought they were fantastic.
Yeah.
But I left there. I moved back to my hometown, and I thought, you know what? I'm going to do it.
Yeah.
I'm going to do it. I'm going to do this. But I mean, while coffee roasting doesn't have any formal education, any mandatory education, having a really strong understanding of coffee roasting techniques and profiles, and then the impact that they have on flavor is very important. For instance, the group that I learned how to roast with before I moved back home, they were very well versed in extremely light roasted coffees, which for me and my flavor preference was where it's at. That was the essence of coffee, was just really light roasts. But then I moved back to regional New South Wales on the east coast of Australia, and I applied the same principles that I had learnt at the facility where I was taught. And it was incredibly discouraging, because I'll never ever forget just how bad I felt, was that I had so many coffees coming back to the bar. It's just because they were flavors that people didn't usually associate with coffee. So it was some of the worst and some of the best times that I've had, is because then I needed to teach myself again how to roast coffees darker, and really expand my sensory analysis and again try and figure out what flavor preferences the consumers wanted. But as I said earlier, that's where I was lucky, is because they were right there for me. But I mean, outside of roasting, education, it's a lot of the literature that is written on coffee roasting, I've found, is very much read between the lines. I didn't realize back then just how different each individual roasting system was. And it got to the point where I was unhappy with my system that I had purchased, and I thought, I'm doing something just totally wrong. It's nothing's working. So I went to the extreme. I sold my Probat. I bought a Gießen. It just had so much more control. But then it forced me again to really teach myself by reading between the lines of the literature that I was reading. And sure, you're going to roast some really poor coffees. I mean, I did. I'll admit it. But I mean, it's just through really hard work and sitting at a cupping table and just nutting it out by yourself. Of course, there's some excellent consultants out there that I've been lucky enough to work with and who have consulted me, and I'm a better roaster for it at the end of the day. But I mean, outside of that, there's coffee quality and sourcing and really understanding different coffee origins and varieties, and also processing methods as well. Then there's the business part of it,
Yeah, which feels like it's the part that coffee roasters are like, but I know how to, I've learned how to roast coffee. I've done, that's what I need to get educated on. But that's kind of really like 20% of it. Because if you can't figure out the business side of it, you won't be able to to make the business, like you won't be able to take your craft to somewhere where it can flourish and you can continue to learn.
Exactly.
What was some of the business stuff that you had to learn about and grow about and in the peripherals?
Acquiring knowledge in business management, in marketing, in sales, in financial management. And then, I mean, is this beneficial in launching and managing my own coffee brand, you know? Am I just another tadpole in the pond? It's, but I mean, you can consider, I mean, the business part of it is, there's a lot more education around that part. You know, you could consider taking courses or workshops related to entrepreneurship or marketing or small business management that develop these skills.
Mm-hmm. I remember we had some conversations about politics and economics and finance and stuff like that. That was like, and banking and interest rates and all that kind of stuff, which was, it's almost the annoying part of education when it comes to being a coffee roaster.
It is, because there's so much craft involved in roasting coffees, you know, and you're like sitting down on MYOB or something. This isn't crafty. This sucks.
Well, and then you start to put the pieces together of like why what's going on in Russia and Ukraine is going to have a massive impact on the coffee supply chain. And all of a sudden you're like, oh no, like I can see the direct link now of how coffee is going to get expensive. And I like buying coffee out of Colombia. So how is this going to impact? How is fertilizer going to be impacted by the war in Russia and Ukraine? And somebody draws a line for you in that way. And you're like, okay, we got some problems coming.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And then
I had my head in the sand, you know, until I was in Colombia last year and I was speaking to producers and they were like, hey, this is what's up. I'm like, oh shit, that's okay. This is real world now. There's geopolitical influence that is having an effect on the coffee industry. And it's easy to sit back and not connect those two. But this is very real.
How much of a benefit would you say it is that you now have this kind of stuff on your radar? Like now that you see, like, let me frame it this way. If you were the kind of coffee roaster that you used to be, where you roasted coffee, you thought about buying coffee from an importer, and looking at the local economy that you've got, worrying about your customers, worrying about profit, and that's it, versus the coffee roasting brand owner that you are today, where you think about things like, sustainability, the impact geopolitics has on the coffee supply chain, the relationships you have with producers, the insight that you have to consumer behavior, the role that global finance and economics is going to have. Like you're a very curious, more well-rounded coffee roaster and business owner as you move into this next brand. Like there's a clear evolution. What do you think the benefits are of being the owner of Full Spectrum versus the owner, the co-owner of Supply Roasting Company?
That was a long question.
Yeah, I know. Does it make sense?
But my Supply, for instance, it's a family-run business.
Yeah.
And I was involved really heavily with my father, who took care of a lot of the financial side of it.
Yeah.
But now, the last sort of 18 months, I've been really forced to just really think outside of the creative outlet that is roasting and really hone in on, okay, is this viable?
Yeah.
And no one can tell you that. No one. You need to sit down, do your due diligence, and figure it out. Because it's with all of this capital investment, all of this hard work needs to be done before you even start planning. And that's the mistake that I made with another project, another coffee project that just it didn't go well. And it's because I didn't spend the time, and I didn't take in all of these in external influences, and I paid the price.
Do you feel empowered? Or do you feel bogged down?
The more information you can jam into your cranium, about everything that is not even associated with coffee. You know, it just provides you with a better way of dealing with issues when they arise, if you have the information available to you.
Is decision making more or less stressful now?
I would say I have a level of freedom, whether that be through creativity or whether that be through roasting or whether it be, I feel so much more empowered because I have a much more firm understanding of the
ecosystem.
Exactly, yes.
Yeah, wow. There's a lot of people who are like, I don't need to understand all this other stuff. Economics is too hard. Finance is too hard. Geopolitics is too hard. Business is too hard. I just want to roast coffee. And I often say to them, well, then go get a job. Because...
And with all honesty, that's been my last, up until 18 months ago, 2 years ago, that was my life. You know, I was naive and I didn't want to have to think about things like this. But now... I mean, this is another cost that's associated with opening a coffee brand now than what it was 10 years ago. It's just the cost of raw materials. And
inflation?
I really, to make myself feel better, I like to go back through old coffee contracts and see what the price was of them, you know?
Why would you do that to yourself? But I totally get it.
I was like, oh, I remember those days. That was $11.50, and now it's $14. Fantastic.
Oh, mate. So another part of the education that you did was that you went to Origin for the first time recently. So
loved it.
In the next episode, folks, we're going to talk about the impact that going to Origin had on Todd as a coffee roaster and how it changed things for him in the way that he approaches business and coffee roasting. So join us for the next episode. Thanks, Todd. Peace, love, and peanut butter, everybody. Have an amazing rest of your day. Thanks for tuning in, friends. There are 2 ways you can support this podcast. Firstly, become a paid member of our YouTube channel. Secondly, you can join our Patreon for as little as $3 a month. Don't forget to subscribe and like this video before you leave and check the show notes for more information. Now, this is what you should check out next.